Hi, Sputnik from the io Crew up here on the trails in South Australia where I live. I'm actually a trail runner, so usually I'm running along these trails, but this morning I'm having a bit of a break because the guys at ioMerino have asked me to have a quick chat to you about layering. Now let's be clear, layering can mean slightly different things to slightly different people. In its simplest form, of course, it means when it gets cold, you put more layers of clothes on to stay warm, but I'm guessing most of you have got the hang of getting dressed, and you've been doing that for quite a few years now and have got that covered. So what we're actually going to be talking about, and what ioMerino are actually referring to when they say layering, is performance layering. Okay, a way to get a much higher level of performance out of your layers so that you can have lightweight, comfortable layers, but still all the warmth you need. So the first thing to keep in mind is that thicker isn't necessarily warmer. So there are all kinds of fabrics out there that perform in all different kinds of ways, and what you're looking for is something super lightweight and comfortable that still gives you all the warmth you need. And ioMerino is a fantastic example of that. Okay, it's super lightweight, super thin, but still gives you a great amount of warmth, and that's obviously one of the most important things with a performance layer. The second thing though is that you want a nice clean kind of warmth. It's the only way I can think of to describe it. And let me give you this example. If you were to put your hand inside a plastic bag and seal it, I'm not recommending you do that, by the way, just take my word for it. But if you were to do that, you would find that the body heat from your hand would accumulate in that bag and you'd very quickly get a lot warmer, but it'd be a sweaty, clammy, kind of uncomfortable warmth. And that's not the kind of warmth you want in a base layer. What you want is a nice clean warmth, and ioMerino breathes, which means whilst it traps the warmth in and keeps you warm, it still allows air to move in and out so you don't have that sweaty, clammy effect. And that's really important in a performance layer. Now speaking of sweaty, another thing you want to look for is a performance layer that handles moisture really well. Okay, when a fabric gets wet, it can very quickly become uncomfortable, and it can be a completely different kind of fabric than what it was like when it was dry. That goes without saying. Anyone who's been caught in the rain knows that a nice dry shirt is a little bit different to a nice wet one. So what you want is a performance layer that's going to perform when it's wet for as long as possible and still keep you warm and comfortable. It sounds a bit like a paradox or a contradiction, but you can be warm and wet at the same time, and that's exactly what ioMerino does. So when you look at how much water different fabrics can absorb, synthetics are usually down in the single figures, so maybe 5 or 6% of their own weight they can absorb in moisture before they're just wet and not very comfortable. Then you get something like cotton, which is in the mid-20s, about 24% I think of its own weight in moisture, and ioMerino is right up there in the mid-30s. Let's say it's about 35% I think the figure is of its own weight in moisture it can absorb before you start feeling it. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to tell that it's wet, but it means it stays warm and comfortable even after it's absorbed 35% of its own weight in moisture. Something really important in a performance layer, whether that's moisture from the inside because you're perspiring or moisture from the outside because it's raining. What it does is it keeps that moisture away from your skin and keeps you as comfortable and warm as possible for as long as possible. The other thing is obviously you just want a nice, smooth, comfortable fabric. Okay, at one end of the scale you've got something like silk, which is super smooth, and then at the other end you've got, I don't know, your old school jumper, which is a really coarse kind of wool. And what you're looking for is something again that has a nice balance of comfort and performance. So ioMerino is an 18.5 micron fabric. Actually 18.5 microns refers to the fibre the fabric's made from, but stick with me on this. So that gives you an indication of how fine the fibre that it's made from is. There's just one trick to this, and I'm going to try and explain this quickly because it's a really important insider tip, and that is different people can use 18.5 microns as a measurement, but actually be using quite different kinds of fibres to make their garments, because the measurement is based on the average fibre. So if you were to use an average of 17.5 and 19.5 fibres, you would be allowed to say that it's 18.5 microns, and that would be a certain kind of fibre that gets turned into yarn and a certain kind of fabric. Makes perfect sense, I hope. But of course, if you use a little bit of finer stuff and a little bit of coarser stuff, and actually put it into an 18.5 micron average, that coarser stuff, even though you can still say it's 18.5, that coarser stuff makes it a lot less comfortable. That's more like the school jumper stuff that's mixed in with the good stuff. And even though certain companies are still allowed to say 18.5 microns because that's the average, it's got some of the scratchy stuff in there. That's not going to be very comfortable. Now, there's no way you can tell just by looking at 18.5 microns and 18.5 microns exactly what combination of stuff they've used to come up with that. The only way you can tell is to touch and feel it. And that's why ioMerino, for example, give you 60 days to go around and wear this stuff and really experience it. Not just put it on in the change room and go, oh, that feels okay, because that's another trick that gets used in the performance layer market. There are certain treatments that you can use on merino wool, for example, that make it feel really comfortable in the shop, but the treatment doesn't last past washing it half a dozen times. Okay, now this is, like I say, this is insider knowledge here, right? Straight from the people who make the wool. I can tell you that, so sometimes when you try something on in the change room, it feels nice and comfortable. You get home, you wear it a couple of times, you wash it a couple of times, and suddenly that comfort's gone. And that's not what you want in a performance layer. And of course, it's also not how micro merino is made. Micro merino, how it feels today is how it feels, okay? There's no tricks and no cover-ups. What else can I tell you? The final thing is performance layers, really good performance layers, are designed to work together in specific combinations, and that's how the micro merino fabrics are designed by ioMerino. So what you've got is you've got your skin, which is considered smooth, even if mine's not super smooth. Then the first layer, when you're looking for maximum warmth, actually has a small texture in it. Then the next layer is smooth, then another texture. And the reason they do this is because even though those textures are quite fine and to touch that fabric it still feels smooth and comfortable, the small ridges in some of those layers, or the textures in the different kinds of layers that they create, actually traps small layers of air in there. So it gives you a whole extra level of insulation. So because the fabrics breathe, it still allows air to pass through those layers, but the air that gets trapped in there helps keep you warm when it's cold and helps keep you cooler when it's warm. So the breathability, the temperature regulation, the smoothness of the fabric, how it handles moisture, all of those sorts of things add up to create a perfect performance layer. So that's my best explanation. I hope that made some sort of sense. There's way more information on the ioMerino website about performance layers, or if you ever have any questions, just send them an email and ask. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you. I hope that was of some use to you. Maybe see you around sometime. See you later.